Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. Some boundaries are meant to protect us. Others are meant to be crossed. But what happens when the line between professional care and personal desire becomes so blurred that you can't tell where healing ends and heartbreak begins? Elena Martinez had never believed in therapy until her world fell apart. At 28, she was a successful marketing executive with a corner office, a sleek apartment, and what everyone called the perfect life. But perfect lives, she learned, could crumble in a single phone call. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. Her younger sister Sophia had been in a car accident. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, insurance calls, and sleepless nights. Sophia recovered, but Elena didn't. The trauma had awakened something dark inside her, panic attacks that came without warning, an inability to focus at work, and a persistent feeling that she was drowning in her own life. "You need to talk to someone," Sophia had said from her hospital bed, her voice still weak but determined. "Promise me you'll get help." That promise led Elena to Dr. Gabriel Santos's office 3 weeks later. The waiting room was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of sterile white walls and uncomfortable chairs, she found herself in a space that felt more like a cozy living room. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes. The scent of lavender hung gently in the air, and classical music played so softly, it was almost subliminal. "Elena Martinez?" She looked up to see a man in his mid-30s standing in the doorway. He was tall with dark hair that was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were the color of dark chocolate, and when he smiled, tiny lines appeared at the corners. A kind that came from genuine laughter, not polite professionalism. "Dr. Santos?" she asked, standing on unsteady legs. "Please, call me Gabriel," he said, extending his hand. His grip was warm and firm, lasting just a moment longer than necessary. "Come in." His office was even more inviting than the waiting room. 2 comfortable armchairs sat facing each other near a window that looked out onto a small garden. Books were scattered across his desk, some open as if he'd been reading multiple texts at once. A half-empty coffee cup sat among the papers, and Elena found herself oddly comforted by these small signs of his humanity. "Tell me what brought you here today," Gabriel said once they were settled. His voice had a slight accent Spanish, she thought, though it was subtle, refined by years of education and practice. Elena had rehearsed this moment in her head dozens of times, but now, sitting across from him, the words came out in a rush. She told him about the accident, about Sophia, about the panic attacks that left her gasping for air in boardrooms and grocery stores. She told him about the sleepless nights and the way her hands shook when she tried to hold a coffee cup. Gabriel listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small notes. But it was the way he looked at her that made her feel truly heard. His attention was complete, as if nothing else in the world mattered in that moment except her story. "Trauma affects everyone differently," he said when she finished. "But the fact that you're here shows incredible strength. It takes courage to ask for help." "I don't feel strong," Elena admitted. "I feel like I'm falling apart." "Sometimes falling apart is the first step toward putting yourself back together," Gabriel said softly. "But this time, you get to choose how the pieces fit." Over the following weeks, Elena began to look forward to their sessions with an intensity that surprised her. Gabriel had a way of making her feel safe enough to explore the darkest corners of her mind. He challenged her thinking without making her feel judged. And somehow, in that quiet office, she began to rediscover parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. But it wasn't just the therapy that drew her back. It was Gabriel himself. She noticed the way he unconsciously tapped his pen against his notebook when he was thinking deeply. She noticed how his eyes lit up when she shared a breakthrough, or a moment of clarity. She noticed the small scar above his left eyebrow and found herself wondering about its story. These observations felt dangerous, inappropriate. She knew she was supposed to focus on her healing, not on the man helping her heal. But the heart, she was learning, didn't always follow the rules. The first hint that Gabriel might be struggling with similar feelings came during their 6th session. Elena had been talking about her fear of vulnerability, about how she built walls to protect herself from getting hurt. Sometimes the walls we build to keep pain out also keep love out, Gabriel said, his voice softer than usual. Have you ever felt trapped by your own walls? Elena asked before she could stop herself. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes meeting hers. I think we all have, he said finally. But this is about your healing, Elena, not mine. The gentle reminder should have been enough to redirect her focus. Instead, it only made her more aware of the man behind the professional facade. In unguarded moments, she caught glimpses of something deeper, a loneliness that mirrored her own, a longing he was too ethical to acknowledge. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult session in November. Elena had been struggling with a panic attack that had struck during a client presentation, and she felt like she was back at square one. I feel like I'm broken, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Like I'll never be normal again. Gabriel leaned forward in his chair, his professional composure cracking slightly. Elena, you're not broken, you're human. And being human means sometimes we struggle, sometimes we fall, and sometimes we need help getting back up. But what if I can't get back up? What if this is just who I am now? Then we'll figure out how to be okay with who you are now, Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. But I don't believe that's your story. I see your strength, your resilience, your capacity for growth, even when you can't see it yourself. Their eyes met across the small space between their chairs, and Elena felt something shift. The air seemed charged with an energy that had nothing to do with therapy and everything to do with the raw, honest moment they were sharing. Gabriel, she whispered, not even sure what she was asking. He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering his strength. Elena, I need you to know that what you're feeling right now, the gratitude, the connection, it's normal. It's part of the therapeutic process. But it's important that we maintain appropriate boundaries. His words were professional, careful, but his voice betrayed him. There was something there, something he was fighting just as hard as she was. Is it just gratitude? Elena asked quietly. Because it doesn't feel like gratitude. Gabriel stood, abruptly, walking to the window. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Elena, we can't discuss this. It wouldn't be appropriate. But you feel it too, she said, standing as well. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his expression took her breath away. What I feel doesn't matter. My job is to help you heal, not to complicate your life further. What if healing means being honest about what we're both feeling? Then we'd be walking down a path that could hurt us both. Gabriel said softly, I have professional obligations, ethical guidelines I've sworn to uphold, and you're vulnerable right now. You deserve someone who can love you without complications, without conflicts of interest. The word love hung in the air between them, unplanned and impossible to take back. Gabriel's face went pale as he realized what he'd said. Gabriel, Elena breathed, stepping closer to him. I think we should end today's session, he said quickly, moving back toward his desk. And Elena, I think it might be best if I referred you to a colleague. Dr. Martinez is excellent, and she— No, Elena said firmly. I'm not leaving. Elena, please. You have to understand. I understand that you're scared. I understand that. This is complicated. But I also understand that what's happening between us is real, and running away from it won't make it disappear. Gabriel sank into his chair, his head in his hands. I could lose my license, my career, everything I've worked. F.O. I'm not asking you to throw away your career, Elena said gently. I'm asking you to be honest with me, with yourself. He looked up at her, and she saw the war raging in his eyes, duty against desire, professional ethics against personal longing. I became a therapist to help people, he said quietly. My own childhood was difficult. My father left when I was 7, and my mother struggled with depression. I watched her fall apart, and I couldn't do anything to help her. I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. Elena felt her heart break for the little boy he'd been, the man he'd become. Is that why you're so afraid of this? Of us? Partly, Gabriel admitted. But also because caring for you, really caring for you, compromises my ability to help you objectively. And right now, you need help more than you need. More than you need whatever this is. What if I'm stronger than you think I am? Elena asked. What if I can handle both? Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about you outside of our sessions, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been wondering what you're doing, how you're feeling, if you're okay. That's not normal for me, Elena. I care about all my clients, but this this is different. Elena felt her heart racing. How long? Since the 3rd session, he admitted. You were talking about your sister, about how guilty you felt for not being there when she needed you. You started crying, and I wanted to hold you. Not as your therapist, but as a man who was falling for a woman who was too brave for her own good. Gabriel I know it's not right. I know it's not ethical. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone before, and that scares me more than losing my license. Elena moved closer to him, her heart pounding. Then what do we do? I don't know, Gabriel said honestly. I've never been in this situation before. Everything I learned in school, everything I've practiced professionally, tells me to refer you to someone else and walk away. But walking away from you feels like the worst kind of betrayal. Of you, of what we've built together, of what we could have. Elena knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Then don't walk away. We'll figure it out together. Gabriel's thumbs traced gentle circles on her hands. It won't be easy. We'll have to be careful, discreet. And we'll have to stop our professional relationship first. I can't be your therapist and whatever else we become. I understand, Elena said. But Gabriel, I need you to know that I'm not confusing gratitude with love. I'm not transferring feelings or whatever the technical term is. I'm a grown woman who's falling for a man who happens to be brilliant, compassionate, and strong enough to help me find myself again. Gabriel cupped her face gently, his thumb wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Elena, if we cross this line, there's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for that? I've never been more sure of anything, she whispered. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Then we'll take it one day at a time. But first, I need to do this the right way. I'll refer you to Dr. Martinez, and we'll wait until you're comfortable with the transition before we before we see where this goes. Elena smiled through her tears. How long do we have to wait? Long enough to make sure you're okay without me as your therapist, Gabriel said. long enough to make sure this is real and not just a reaction to the intense emotions of therapy. And if it's real? Gabriel's smile was soft and full of promise. Then we'll have the rest of our lives to figure out how to love each other properly. The transition was harder than either of them had expected. Elena found herself struggling with Dr. Martinez, a perfectly competent therapist who wasn't Gabriel. She missed their conversations, their breakthroughs, the way he challenged her to see herself differently. But Gabriel was true to his word. He called to check on her progress, always professional, always appropriate. But Elena could hear the longing in his voice, the way he lingered on certain words, the slight catch in his breathing when she said his name. 2 months after their last official session, Gabriel called with a different tone in his voice. "Elena? It's Gabriel. I was wondering, would you like to have coffee with me? Not as doctor and patient, but as 2 people who'd like to get to know each other better." Eleanor's heart soared. "I would love that." They met at a small cafe downtown, both nervous and excited. Without the structure of their therapeutic relationship, they had to learn each other all over again. Gabriel was funnier than she'd realized, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh until her sides hurt. Elena was more adventurous than he'd expected, with stories of impromptu trips and spontaneous decisions that fascinated him. "I have to admit," Gabriel said as they walked through the park after coffee, "I was terrified you'd realize I was just a boring therapist without the mystique of the professional relationship." Elena laughed, linking her arm through his. "And I was terrified you'd realize I was just a mess without the excuse of being your patient." "Well, you are a mess," Gabriel said with a grin. "But you're my kind of mess." Their first kiss happened 3 weeks later under a streetlight outside her apartment. It was soft and tentative, full of months of restrained longing finally given permission to exist. "No regrets?" Gabriel asked, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Only that we waited so long," Elena whispered against his lips. Their love story wasn't conventional. They had to navigate the complicated terrain of a relationship that had begun in such unusual circumstances. There were challenges, Gabriel's colleagues who questioned his judgment, Elena's moments of doubt about whether her feelings were genuine or manufactured by the intensity of therapy. But they worked through each obstacle together, with the same honesty and vulnerability that had brought them together in the first place. Gabriel helped Elena continue her healing journey, not as her therapist but as her partner, her best friend, her safe harbor in life's storms. And Elena helped Gabriel heal too, from the childhood wounds that had driven him to become a helper, from the loneliness that had kept him isolated even in rooms full of people. 1.5 years after their first coffee date, Gabriel proposed in the same park where they'd taken their first walk as a couple. Elena said yes through tears of joy, knowing that their love story was proof that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. Their wedding was small and intimate, filled with the people who mattered most. Sophia gave a speech about how proud she was of her sister for being brave enough to ask for help and smart enough to fall in love with her therapist. The guests laughed, but Elena and Gabriel knew the deeper truth, that love doesn't always follow the rules, and sometimes the greatest healing comes, not from professional distance, but from the courage to be vulnerable with another human being. As they danced to their first song as husband and wife, Elena looked up at the man who had helped her piece herself back together, and then loved her enough to help her become even stronger than she'd been before. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked, echoing their conversation from so many months ago. Elena smiled, her heart full of gratitude for the accident that had led to Sophia's recovery, the panic attacks that had led to therapy, and the broken moments that had led to this perfect one. "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Because sometimes the person meant to heal you is also the person meant to love you. And sometimes, breaking all the rules is the only way to become whole. And what started as a professional relationship became a love story that defied all conventions. Sometimes the heart knows what it needs before the mind can understand. Sometimes healing and loving are the same thing. And sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin with the words, "I need help."